Elena stared at the cream-colored envelope on her kitchen table like it might suddenly burst into flames. The paper was so thick and expensive-looking that she was almost afraid to touch it with her flour-dusted hands. She'd been making tortillas when the mail arrived, trying to stretch her grocery budget for another week. The envelope had her name on it. Well, sort of. It said E. Martinez in elegant gold lettering that probably cost more than her entire week's groceries. Elena wiped her hands on her apron and carefully opened it, trying not to tear the fancy paper. Inside was an invitation to something called the Harrington Arts Gala. Her eyes went wide as she read the details. It was one of those events she'd only seen in movies, where rich people wore dresses that cost more than her car and sipped champagne while discussing art. The invitation mentioned a dinner, live music, and a charity auction. It was happening this Saturday at the Belmont Hotel, one of the fanciest places in the city. Elena laughed out loud in her tiny apartment. This had to be a mistake. She was a piano tuner. She spent her days driving around the city in her beat-up Honda, adjusting strings and fixing broken keys for music schools, churches, and the occasional wealthy family who actually owned a piano. She made enough to pay rent and eat, but just barely. There was no way this invitation was really meant for her. She pulled out her phone and called her best friend Carmen. They had known each other since high school, back when Elena's life looked completely different. "You're not going to believe what just came in the mail," Elena said, still holding the invitation like it might disappear. Carmen arrived 20 minutes later with coffee and pan dulce from the bakery down the street. She grabbed the invitation and let out a low whistle. "This is real," Carmen said, turning it over in her hands. "Look at this paper. And is that actual gold leaf?" "It has to be a mistake," Elena said, biting into a piece of sweetbread. "They probably meant to invite some other E. Martinez. Maybe that art collector guy I read about in the paper. Enrique Martinez. He's always going to these things, so what?" Carmen said, her eyes lighting up with that dangerous sparkle Elena knew too well. "You're E. Martinez too. The invitation has your address on it. That means you can go." Elena shook her head. "I can't just show up at some fancy gala. I don't belong there." "Why not?" Carmen challenged. "You studied at the conservatory. You know more about music than half the people who'll be there. And who knows? Maybe you'll meet some rich people who need their pianos tuned. You could get some good clients out of this." Elena thought about her bank account. She had exactly $327 until her next payment came through. Her car needed new brakes. Her rent was due in 2 weeks. She really could use some wealthy clients who paid on time. "I don't have anything to wear," Elena said weakly. Carmen grinned. "I have that black dress from my cousin's wedding. You remember it? It's simple but elegant. It'll look perfect on you." That's how Elena found herself standing in front of her bathroom mirror on Saturday evening, wearing Carmen's borrowed dress and the only pair of nice shoes she owned. The dress was simple, like Carmen said. Nothing fancy, no sparkles or designer label, just a plain black dress that fit well enough. Her shoes were a few years old, and if you looked closely, you could see where she'd touched up a scuff mark with a Sharpie. She had pulled her dark hair back into a simple bun and put on the small silver earrings her grandmother had given her years ago. Looking at herself in the mirror, Elena thought she looked presentable. Not glamorous, but neat and respectful. Carmen had offered to do her makeup, but Elena kept it simple. A little mascara, some lip color, and that was it. She wasn't trying to pretend to be something she wasn't. She was just going to an event, maybe make some connections and leave quietly. Her hands shook a little as she grabbed her purse. It was old and the strap was worn, but it was clean. Inside, she had tucked the invitation, her phone, and $20 in case of emergency. She had no idea what to expect. The Belmont Hotel rose up from the downtown streets like a palace. Elena had driven past it hundreds of times but had never been inside. The entrance was lit up with golden lights and a red carpet ran from the curb to the massive glass doors. Actual red carpet. She thought that only happened in movies. A valet in a crisp uniform approached her car, and for a moment Elena almost drove away. Her Honda looked so out of place among the sleek luxury cars lined up along the street. But the valet smiled politely and opened her door, handing her a ticket without even glancing at her old car. "Enjoy your evening, miss," he said. Elena walked toward the entrance, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Other guests were arriving too, and she couldn't help but notice the difference. The women wore gowns that shimmered and flowed like water. Their jewelry caught the light, sending tiny rainbows across the red carpet. The men wore tuxedos that fit like they were painted on, with watches that probably cost more than Elena made in a year. She clutched her worn purse a little tighter and kept walking. Inside, the hotel lobby took her breath away. The ceiling soared 3 stories high, covered in painted murals of clouds and angels. A massive chandelier hung in the center, dripping with what had to be thousands of crystals. The marble floor was so polished she could see her reflection in it. Signs directed guests to the Imperial Ballroom on the 2nd floor. Elena followed the crowd, trying to blend in and not stare at everything like a tourist. She climbed a curved staircase with a brass railing, her hand barely touching it, afraid she might leave fingerprints. The ballroom doors were open, and music drifted out. Not recorded music, but live jazz from a small band in the corner. Elena paused at the entrance, taking it all in. Round tables covered in white linens filled the space, each one decorated with towering flower arrangements. The flowers alone probably cost more than her monthly rent. Along one wall, a long table displayed items for the charity auction, each one lit up like a museum piece. She saw paintings, sculptures, jewelry, and even a vacation package to somewhere tropical. And then she saw the piano. It sat on a raised stage at the far end of the ballroom, a beautiful black grand piano that gleamed under the spotlight. Just looking at it made Elena's fingers itch. She wondered who was going to play it tonight. The invitation had mentioned a performance by some famous pianist, but she couldn't remember the name. People were already mingling, holding champagne glasses and talking in clusters. Their laughter was light and easy, the sound of people who belonged here. Elena took a deep breath and stepped into the ballroom. That's when she noticed the looks. At first, she thought maybe she was imagining it. But no, people were definitely glancing at her. A woman in a silver gown that probably cost more than Elena's car looked her up and down, then whispered something to the man next to her. They both stared. Another group of women near the auction table stopped talking as Elena walked past. She heard one of them say something, followed by quiet laughter. Elena's face grew hot. She knew she didn't look like she belonged here, but she hadn't expected it to be this obvious. She had thought maybe she could just blend into the background, observe the event, and slip out early. But judging by the stares and whispers following her across the ballroom, blending in was not going to be an option. Elena made her way to an empty chair at one of the tables near the back. Maybe if she just sat down and stayed quiet, people would stop staring. She could enjoy the music, eat dinner if they served it, and then leave. Simple plan. But before she could even pull out the chair, a woman's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Excuse me? I think you might be in the wrong place." Elena turned around. A woman in a deep purple gown was looking at her with an expression that was somehow both polite and condescending at the same time. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, and diamonds sparkled at her throat and wrists. She had the kind of face that was used to getting what it wanted. "I'm sorry," Elena said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "This is the Harrington Arts Gala," the woman said, speaking slowly like Elena might not understand English. "It's a private, invitation-only event. Are you perhaps looking for the hotel restaurant? I believe they're still serving downstairs." Heat rushed to Elena's face. "I have an invitation," she said quietly. The woman's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Do you really?" Her tone suggested this was highly unlikely. Elena fumbled in her purse and pulled out the cream-colored invitation. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held it out. The woman took it, and 2 of her friends drifted over to look. They examined it like it was evidence in a crime scene, turning it over, holding it up to the light. "Victoria, is everything all right?" one of the friends asked, a rail-thin woman in a red dress that probably cost more than Elena's rent for 6 months. "This girl claims she was invited," Victoria said, still studying the invitation. "But look at this. E. Martinez. That's supposed to be Enrique Martinez, the art collector. Everyone knows that." "Maybe it's a fake," the woman in red suggested, loud enough for people at nearby tables to hear. "You know, sometimes people forge these things to get into events. Free food and all that." Elena's stomach twisted. More people were turning to look now, drawn by the commotion. She felt like she was shrinking, getting smaller with each stare. "I didn't forge anything," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The invitation came to my address. My name is Elena Martinez. E. Martinez. I thought maybe it was a mistake, but it had my name and address, so I came." "How convenient," Victoria said with a thin smile. She snapped her fingers, and a young man in a hotel uniform hurried over. "Thomas, could you please get Daniel? We may have a situation here." Elena's heart was pounding now. "Look, if there's been a mistake, I can just leave. I don't want any trouble." "Oh, you'll leave," Victoria said. "But first, we need to verify how you got that invitation. Security concerns, you understand. We have very important people here tonight." A small crowd had gathered now. Elena could feel their eyes on her worn purse, her simple dress, her shoes that she'd touched up with a marker. She felt exposed, like she was standing under a spotlight with all her struggles and financial problems on display for these wealthy strangers to judge. An older man in a crisp suit approached. He had a name tag that read Daniel Chen, Security Director. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked. Victoria handed him the invitation. "This young woman showed up with this invitation, but I have serious doubts about its authenticity. She doesn't appear on any of the guest lists I've seen, and frankly, she doesn't seem like someone who would be invited to an event of this caliber." Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to cry. "Not here. Not in front of these people." Daniel examined the invitation carefully. "Miss, can I see some identification, please?" With trembling hands, Elena pulled out her driver's license. He looked at it, then at the invitation, then at her. "The name matches," he said slowly. "And this does appear to be an authentic invitation. These are nearly impossible to forge. The paper has security features embedded in it." "But that's impossible," Victoria insisted. "There must be some explanation. Maybe she stole it, or found it somewhere." "I didn't steal anything," Elena said, her voice finally rising. She was humiliated, but she wasn't going to be called a thief. "I received it in the mail at my apartment. I'm a piano tuner. I work hard for my money. I don't steal." "A piano tuner?" Victoria laughed, and several people around her joined in. "Oh, that's rich. So you tune pianos and somehow you end up on the guest list for one of the most exclusive charity events of the year? That makes perfect sense." Someone in the crowd pulled out their phone and took a picture. Elena saw the flash and felt sick. This was going to end up on social media. People would share it, laugh at it. The poor girl who crashed a fancy party. "I think there may have been an administrative error," Daniel said diplomatically. "Perhaps the invitation was meant for someone else and was sent to the wrong address. It happens sometimes with our mailing systems." "So she needs to leave," Victoria said triumphantly. "I'm going," Elena said, backing away. "I'm sorry for the confusion. I'll just go." She turned to walk away, desperate to get out of this ballroom and away from all these staring faces. But as she moved, she bumped into a server carrying a tray of champagne glasses. The tray tilted, and 3 glasses fell, shattering on the marble floor with a crash that seemed to echo through the entire ballroom. The room went silent. Everyone was looking at her. "I'm so sorry," Elena whispered to the server, a young man who looked almost as uncomfortable as she felt. "It's okay, miss," he said kindly. "Accidents happen." But Victoria wasn't done. "This is exactly what I was talking about," she announced to the crowd. "This is what happens when people who don't belong try to attend events they weren't meant for. Now we have broken glass and a disrupted evening." "That's enough, Victoria," said an older gentleman who had just walked over. He had kind eyes and silver hair, and unlike everyone else, he didn't look at Elena like she was something unpleasant he'd stepped in. "The young lady has apologized. Let's let her be." "Mr. Harrington," Victoria said, her tone changing immediately to something sickeningly sweet. "I was just trying to handle a security situation. This woman showed up with a questionable invitation, and now she's causing disruptions." So this was Robert Harrington, Elena realized. The man whose foundation was hosting this gala. The man whose name was on the invitation. "Let me see the invitation," he said. Daniel handed it to him. Robert studied it for a long moment, then looked at Elena with those kind eyes. "Did you receive this in the mail, Miss Martinez?" "Yes, sir," Elena said quietly. I know it was probably a mistake. I shouldn't have come. I'll leave now. Actually, Robert said slowly, I'm trying to remember why this name seems familiar. E. Martinez. There was something about... He paused, thinking. Daniel, could you check with my assistant? I believe there was a notation about this invitation. Daniel pulled out his phone and stepped away, speaking in low tones. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. Robert, surely we don't need to waste time on this. We have a schedule to keep. The performance is supposed to start in 30 minutes. We have time, Robert said firmly. Daniel returned, his expression apologetic. Mr. Harrington, I spoke with your assistant. There was indeed a note about this invitation. Apparently, someone requested that E. Martinez be invited. But the note didn't specify which E. Martinez, and there was confusion in the office. The invitation was sent to multiple addresses. So, it was meant for Enrique, the art collector, Victoria said with satisfaction. Not this girl. The note doesn't specify, Daniel said. It just says E. Martinez. Robert looked at Elena thoughtfully. Well, regardless of the confusion, you're here now with a valid invitation. You're welcome to stay if you'd like. That's ridiculous, Victoria protested. Robert, think about the other guests. Think about the foundation's reputation. We can't just let anyone stay. Elena had heard enough. Her humiliation was complete. She didn't want these people's pity or charity. Thank you, Mr. Harrington, she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill over. But I think it's best if I leave. I'm clearly not welcome here, and I don't want to cause any more problems. She turned to go, but then she heard it, the sound that made her stop in her tracks. From the stage, someone was testing the piano. Just a few notes running up and down a scale. But Elena could hear immediately that something was wrong. The middle C was slightly flat. So was the E above it. Someone had tuned this piano, but they hadn't done it well. Without thinking, she turned back toward the stage. The piano sat there under the spotlight, beautiful and waiting. And despite everything that had just happened, despite the humiliation and the stares and the broken glass, Elena felt a pull toward that instrument that she couldn't resist. The piano, she said softly. It's out of tune, Victoria laughed. Oh, now she's a music expert too? This gets better and better. But Robert was watching Elena with interest. You can hear that from here? That it's out of tune? Yes, sir, Elena said. The middle C is about 20 cents flat, and the E. Whoever tuned it did an okay job, but they rushed through the middle register. It happens a lot when people are working on a deadline. Robert walked over to the stage and played the same notes. His fingers were skilled, Elena noticed. He knew his way around a piano. She's right, he said, surprise in his voice. How did you know that? I told you, Elena said. I'm a piano tuner. It's what I do for a living. For the first time that evening, Victoria looked uncertain. Robert played a few more notes on the piano, his expression thoughtful. You really can hear the difference, can't you? Elena nodded. It's not terrible. Most people probably wouldn't notice, but for a performance, especially in a room with this kind of acoustics, it could be distracting. Well, unfortunately, we don't have time to get it properly tuned now, Robert said, glancing at his watch. Our pianist should be arriving any moment. I'm sure he'll manage. As if on cue, Robert's assistant rushed into the ballroom. She was young, probably in her 20s, and she looked panicked. She hurried over to Robert and whispered something in his ear. Elena watched as Robert's face fell. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, raising his voice to address the crowd. I'm afraid I have some disappointing news. Our featured performer for this evening, Trevor Chen, has been involved in a traffic incident. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He's perfectly fine, Robert added quickly. No injuries, but his car was hit on the interstate, and he's currently stuck in what police are describing as a major pileup. Multiple vehicles. He's called to say he's going to be at least 2 hours late, possibly more. The crowd erupted in disappointed murmurs. People pulled out their phones, probably checking the news for information about the accident. Elena could hear fragments of conversations around her. 2 hours? That will completely throw off the schedule. What about the auction? We can't start that without the performance. This is a disaster. People will start leaving. Victoria, who had been quiet since Elena correctly identified the piano problem, spoke up. Robert, surely we can find some recorded music to play? Just to keep the atmosphere pleasant while we wait? Recorded music at a live performance gala? Someone scoffed. That would be embarrassing. Robert stood on the stage looking out at the restless crowd. Elena could see the stress on his face. This was a charity event, which meant it was supposed to raise money for something important. If people left before the auction, that would be a problem. Elena looked at the piano again. The beautiful grand piano that no one was going to play for at least 2 hours. Her fingers itched. She had spent 5 years at the conservatory before her mother got sick. 5 years of practice, lessons, recitals, and dreams. She had been good. Really good. Her teachers had said she had potential for a real career, but then her mother's medical bills started piling up. Elena had dropped out to work full-time, and piano tuning was the closest she could get to the music she loved. She hadn't performed in front of an audience in 6 years. She practiced sometimes in her apartment on the old keyboard Carmen had given her, but it wasn't the same as a real piano. The words came out of her mouth before she could stop them. I could play. The room went silent. Every head turned toward her. I'm sorry, what? Robert said. Elena's heart was racing, but she couldn't take the words back now. I said I could play, just until the actual performer gets here, to fill the time. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Victoria burst out laughing. Oh, this is perfect, Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. First, she crashes the party with a questionable invitation. Then she breaks our glasses, and now she wants to perform. What's next? Is she going to auction herself off for charity? A few people laughed nervously, but Elena noticed that some faces in the crowd looked interested. Curious even. You play piano? Robert asked, and his tone wasn't mocking. He sounded genuinely interested. I studied at the Riverside Conservatory for 5 years, Elena said. Her voice was shaking, but she kept going. I had to drop out before I finished, but I was in the performance program. I know it's not the same as having a famous pianist, but I could play something. It's better than nothing, right? The Riverside Conservatory. An elderly woman in the front row perked up. That's a serious program. Very competitive. She probably took a few lessons and calls it studying, Victoria muttered, but less confidently than before. Robert studied Elena for a long moment. She could see him weighing his options. A room full of wealthy donors getting restless and bored, or taking a chance on a girl who had shown up in a simple dress and somehow knew exactly which notes on his piano were out of tune. What would you play? He asked. Elena's mind raced. She needed something impressive, something that would prove she wasn't wasting everyone's time, but she also needed something she knew she could pull off, even though she hadn't performed in years and her hands were shaking from nerves and humiliation. Rachmaninoff, she said. Piano Concerto No. 2, just the first movement. It's about 12 minutes, Victoria actually gasped. You cannot be serious. That's one of the most difficult pieces in classical repertoire. Even professional pianists struggle with it. I know, Elena said quietly. I performed it for my final recital at the conservatory. Robert looked at his assistant, then back at Elena. She could see him doing the math. 12 minutes would buy him time. Even if she wasn't great, it would be something. And if she was actually good, it might save the entire evening. All right, he said finally. But Miss Martinez, I need to be honest with you. If this doesn't go well, it could be quite embarrassing. For both of us. Are you sure you want to do this? Elena thought about her apartment, about her beat-up car, about the way Victoria and her friends had looked at her like she was trash. She thought about the 6 years since she'd left the conservatory, all the dreams she'd packed away because life had other plans. I'm sure, she said. Victoria threw up her hands. Robert, this is insane. You're going to let some random girl who crashed the party play piano for our guests? Think about the foundation's reputation. Think about the donors. What if she's terrible? Then we'll politely thank her and wait for Trevor, Robert said calmly. But something tells me we should give her a chance. Call it intuition. He gestured toward the stage. Miss Martinez, the piano is yours. Elena's legs felt like jelly as she walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for her, and she could feel every eye following her movement. Some people looked curious. Others looked skeptical. Victoria looked furious. As Elena climbed the steps to the stage, she heard whispers following her. Is he really letting her do this? This is going to be a train wreck. Someone should record this. It'll be hilarious. Elena sat down at the piano bench and adjusted it slightly. The piano was a Steinway, probably worth more than she'd make in 5 years of tuning pianos. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the smooth ivory under her fingers. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to center herself. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands were trembling. She hadn't performed in front of people in 6 years. What if she messed up? What if she forgot the notes? What if Victoria was right, and this was just going to be embarrassing? But then she thought about her mother, who had sacrificed so much and never got to see her daughter graduate from the conservatory. She thought about all the hours she'd spent practicing this piece, falling in love with every note. She thought about the part of herself she'd locked away 6 years ago when she decided that surviving was more important than dreaming. Elena opened her eyes and began to play the first few measures of Rachmaninoff's second piano. Concerto are quiet, almost hesitant. The right hand plays a simple melody, while the left hand provides soft accompaniment. It's deceptively simple at first, and Elena could hear people in the audience shifting in their seats, probably thinking this was going to be boring. But then the piece begins to build. The melody grows stronger, more confident. The left hand starts adding complexity, and suddenly both hands are flying across the keys in a cascade of notes that sound like a waterfall. Elena felt something shift inside her. Her nervousness didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else. Energy, focus, pure emotion. This piece was about longing and passion and triumph over struggle. She knew those feelings intimately. Her fingers moved faster, racing through the technical passages that had taken her months to master years ago. Muscle memory took over, and suddenly she wasn't in a ballroom full of people who had mocked her. She was back at the conservatory, playing for her teacher who believed in her. She was in her childhood living room, playing for her mother who would stop whatever she was doing just to listen. The whispers in the crowd stopped. Elena could feel the shift in the room even with her eyes closed. People weren't checking their phones anymore. They weren't talking. They were listening. She reached the section where the melody soars, where the piano sounds like it's singing. This was the part that always made her teacher cry. Elena poured everything into it. All the frustration of the last 6 years. All the times she'd driven to some mansion to tune a piano and imagined what it would be like to play in front of people again. All the dreams she'd folded up and put away like old clothes that didn't fit anymore. Tears started running down her face. But she didn't stop playing. She couldn't stop. The music was pulling something out of her that had been buried for too long. The first movement builds to a powerful climax, where both hands are pounding out chords that seem to shake the air. Elena's whole body moved with the music, swaying slightly as her fingers found every note, every dynamic, every subtle nuance that made this piece something more than just notes on a page. When she played the final chord, letting it ring out into the silence of the ballroom, she kept her hands on the keys for a moment. She was breathing hard, emotionally drained, almost surprised to find herself back in reality. Then she heard it. One person started clapping, then another. Then the entire room erupted. The applause was deafening. Elena sat frozen at the piano bench, her hands still resting on the keys, unable to fully process what was happening. People weren't just clapping politely. They were on their feet, giving her a standing ovation that seemed to shake the chandelier above. She wiped the tears from her face with shaking hands and slowly stood up. The applause got even louder. She could see faces in the crowd that had been mocking her just 20 minutes ago, now clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Some people had tears in their own eyes. Robert was the first to reach the stage. His face was flushed with emotion, and when he took Elena's hand, his grip was warm and firm. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice thick. "Absolutely extraordinary. Where have you been hiding?" "Tuning pianos, mostly," Elena said with a weak laugh, still trying to catch her breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert announced to the crowd, his arm around Elena's shoulder like she was an old friend. "I think we can all agree that Miss Elena Martinez is not just a piano tuner. She is a remarkable musician who deserves our recognition and respect." The crowd erupted in applause again. Elena saw Victoria in the third row, clapping slowly with a tight smile on her face. She looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. An elegant older woman in a navy gown made her way to the stage. She had silver hair styled in a sophisticated bob, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from decades of knowing exactly who she was. "Miss Martinez," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Dorothy Richardson. I'm on the board of directors at the Riverside Conservatory." Elena's eyes went wide. "You are?" "I am indeed, and I remember you." Dorothy's eyes were kind but sharp. "You left the program 6 years ago, didn't you? Middle of your 5th year. Your professors were devastated. They said you were one of the most promising students they'd had in a decade." Elena felt her throat tighten. "My mother got sick. Breast cancer. The medical bills were too much. I had to drop out and work full-time." Dorothy nodded slowly. "I'm so sorry to hear that. Is your mother doing better now?" "She passed away 3 years ago," Elena said quietly. "Oh, my dear." Dorothy squeezed her hand. "I'm so very sorry, but I want you to know something." "What you just played?" "That was conservatory graduation level. Beyond it, actually. You haven't lost your gift, Elena. Not even a little bit." Before Elena could respond, a man in an expensive suit approached with a business card in his hand. "Miss Martinez, I'm Paul Chen. I run Heritage Records. We specialize in classical music. I would love to talk to you about a recording contract." Elena stared at the card like it might disappear. "A recording contract? Your interpretation of Rachmaninoff was stunning," Paul said. "Raw, emotional, technically flawless. That's exactly what the classical music world needs right now. Real feeling, not just perfect notes." More people crowded around the stage. A woman who owned a gallery wanted to book Elena for a private concert. A man who managed a concert hall asked if she'd be interested in performing there. Someone else thrust a phone in her face, explaining that they'd recorded the performance and it was already getting shared online. Elena's head was spinning. This couldn't be real. 20 minutes ago, these people had been laughing at her. Now they were offering her opportunities she'd only dreamed about. Robert gently helped her down from the stage and guided her to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "You need a moment to breathe," he said kindly. "This is a lot to take in." "Mr. Harrington, I don't understand what's happening," Elena said, her voice shaking. "I just played a piano piece." "That's all? That's all?" Robert smiled. "Elena, you didn't just play a piece. You reminded everyone in this room why music matters, why art matters. You took something technical and made it human. That's rare. That's special." An assistant brought Elena a glass of water and she drank it gratefully. Her hands were still trembling with adrenaline. Victoria appeared at the edge of their conversation, looking uncomfortable. She had lost all her earlier confidence, and for the first time that evening she looked uncertain. "Miss Martinez," she said stiffly. "I owe you an apology." Elena turned to face her. Victoria's friend stood a few feet behind her, watching with embarrassed expressions. "I was rude to you," Victoria continued. "I made assumptions based on appearances and I was wrong. What you played was beautiful. I'm sorry for how I treated you." Elena could have been petty. She could have thrown Victoria's cruelty back in her face. But looking at the woman now, she just saw someone who had been taught to value the wrong things. "Thank you for apologizing," Elena said simply. "I accept it." Victoria nodded and walked away, her shoulders slightly slumped. Her friends followed, whispering among themselves. "That was gracious of you," Robert said. "She was mean," Elena said. "But I've had worse days than being insulted at a fancy party. At least this one ended well." Robert laughed. "Well, speaking of ending well, I have a proposition for you. The Harrington Foundation provides scholarships for promising artists who need financial support. Full tuition, living expenses, everything. I would like to offer you one of those scholarships to complete your degree at the conservatory." Elena felt her knees go weak. "What? You have 1 year left, correct? We'll cover all of it. No strings attached. All we ask is that you continue making beautiful music." "I can't accept that," Elena said automatically, even though every part of her wanted to say yes. "That's too much. It's what the foundation is for," Robert insisted. "Helping talented people who deserve opportunities. Elena, you walked into a room full of people who judged you unfairly and you responded by creating something beautiful. That's exactly the kind of person we want to support." Dorothy appeared again, having clearly overheard the conversation. "And I'll personally make sure you're readmitted to the conservatory with full standing," she added. "Your previous credits will all transfer. You could graduate next spring." Elena's vision blurred with tears again. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Robert said gently. Let us help you finish what you started." Before Elena could answer, there was a commotion at the ballroom entrance. A man in his 40s rushed in, carrying a violin case and looking frazzled. His tuxedo was disheveled and his hair stuck up in odd directions. "Robert, I'm so sorry," the man called out. "The accident, the traffic, it was absolute chaos. I got here as fast as I could." "Trevor," Robert said. "We're just glad you're safe. How are you?" Trevor Chen, the famous pianist who was supposed to perform, looked around the room in confusion. "Did I miss the performance? I thought I'd be early enough since we were supposed to start at 8. "Well," Robert said with a smile, "we had a slight change of plans." "Someone filled in for you?" Trevor's eyebrows shot up. "Someone filled in? Who?" Robert gestured to Elena. "Trevor, meet Elena Martinez. She's a piano tuner who also happens to be an extraordinarily talented pianist. She played Rachmaninoff's second while we waited for you." Trevor looked at Elena with interest. "You played the Rachmaninoff? The whole first movement?" "Yes, sir," Elena said nervously. She knew who Trevor Chen was. Everyone who studied piano knew who he was. He had performed at Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, venues all over the world. He was a legend. "How did it go?" Trevor asked Robert. "See for yourself," Paul said, pulling out his phone. "I recorded the whole thing." Trevor watched the video, his expression neutral at first. But as he watched, his eyes widened. When the video ended, he looked at Elena with something like amazement. "That was you?" he asked. Elena nodded. "That was remarkable," Trevor said. "Your technical skill is impressive, but your emotional interpretation was extraordinary. How long have you been performing professionally?" "I haven't," Elena admitted. "I dropped out of conservatory 6 years ago." "I haven't performed in front of an audience since then." Trevor looked stunned. "You're telling me that was your first performance in 6 years? And you chose Rachmaninoff's second? That's either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "Probably both," Elena said with a small smile. Trevor laughed. "I like you. Listen, I'm supposed to play a few pieces tonight, but I have a better idea. Would you be willing to play a duet with me? There's a beautiful 4-hand arrangement of Dvorak that would work perfectly." Elena's mouth fell open. "You want me to play with you?" "I'd be honored," Trevor said. "It's not every day I meet someone with your level of talent and heart." "What do you say?" Elena looked around the room. At Dorothy, who was smiling encouragingly. At Robert, who had given her a chance when everyone else wanted her to leave. At the crowd of people who had seen past their own prejudices to recognize something real. At Paul, who wanted to record her music. At all the business cards now clutched in her hand, each one representing a door that had suddenly opened. She thought about her mother, who had always believed Elena would make it somehow, who had sacrificed so much to pay for those 5 years of conservatory before getting sick, who had made Elena promise not to give up on music even when it seemed impossible. "Yes," Elena said, her voice clear and strong. "I'd love to play with you." The crowd applauded as Elena and Trevor walked to the stage together. As she sat at the piano bench beside one of the most famous pianists in the country, Elena realized that her life had just changed completely. The girl who had walked into this ballroom in a borrowed dress, carrying a worn purse and $20 in cash, was gone. In her place was someone who had remembered who she really was. Someone who had found her voice again through 88 keys and a piece of music that spoke to her soul. Elena placed her hands on the piano keys, Trevor beside her, and they began to play. The duet with Trevor was magical. They played Dvorak's Slavonic Dance, their hands moving across the keyboard in perfect harmony. Where Elena had played alone with raw emotion, playing alongside Trevor felt like having a conversation without words. He would play a phrase and she would answer it. They built on each other's energy, creating something neither could have done alone. When they finished, the standing ovation was even longer than before. People were cheering, not just clapping. Elena saw phones everywhere, recording, photographing, capturing this moment that felt both surreal and more real than anything she'd experienced in years. As the evening continued, Elena found herself surrounded by people who genuinely wanted to know her story. Not to mock her, but to understand her. A journalist from the art section of the newspaper asked for an interview. A teacher from a music school wanted to know if she'd consider giving lessons to advanced students. Someone even asked if she'd be willing to speak at their daughter's school about perseverance and following dreams. Carmen called 3 times, but Elena couldn't answer in the ballroom. When she finally stepped outside to call back, her best friend was practically screaming into the phone. "Elena, You're all over social media. Someone posted a video of you playing and it has like 50,000 views already. People are calling you the mystery pianist. What is happening?" Elena laughed, feeling giddy and exhausted at the same time. "I don't even know how to explain it, Carmen. It's been the strangest night of my life. Strange good or strange bad? Strange incredible," Elena said, her voice cracking with emotion. "They're giving me a scholarship, Carmen. A full scholarship to finish my degree. And there's a recording company that wants to work with me. And I just played a duet with Trevor Chen." Carmen screamed so loud that Elena had to hold the phone away from her ear. "I'm coming there right now." "Where is this place?" "I'm getting in my car." No, Elena said, laughing. "Stay home. I'll come over later and tell you everything. I just needed to hear your voice for a second." "I'm so proud of you," Carmen said, and Elena could hear the tears in her friend's voice. "Your mom would be so proud too." Elena had to wipe her eyes again. "I know, I kept thinking about her while I was playing. I wish she could have been here." "She was there," Carmen said softly. "I believe that. She was there." When Elena went back inside, Robert was waiting with Dorothy and Paul. They had serious expressions on their faces. And for a moment, Elena worried that something had gone wrong. "Elena, we need to talk about something important," Robert said. "The video of your performance is spreading very quickly online. By tomorrow morning, you're going to have a lot of attention. News outlets, social media, people wanting interviews. This is going to change your life in ways you might not be prepared for. We want to help you navigate this properly." Dorothy added, "You need a manager, someone who can handle the business side of things while you focus on your music. Paul has someone excellent in mind. And you need to be smart about which opportunities you accept," Paul said. "Everyone is going to want a piece of you now. Some of those opportunities will be genuine, and some will try to take advantage of you." Elena felt overwhelmed again. "I don't know anything about this world. I've just been trying to pay my rent and keep my car running." "That's exactly why you need help," Robert said kindly, "and that's what we're offering. The foundation can connect you with people who will look out for your interests. We've done this before with other artists." Trevor joined their circle, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. He offered one to Elena. "Congratulations," he said. "You earned this." Elena took a small sip. She'd never been much of a drinker, but tonight felt like a night for trying new things. "I have something to ask you," Trevor said. "I'm performing at the Riverside Theater next month. It's a benefit concert for music education. I want you to be my featured guest. We could play several duets and you could have a solo piece. What do you think?" "The Riverside Theater?" Elena repeated. That was a real concert hall, a place where serious musicians performed. "You really want me to play there?" "I really do," Trevor said. "Elena, you have something special. It's not just technical skill, though you have plenty of that. It's authenticity. People can feel it when you play. They can feel that you've lived life, that you've struggled, that you know what it means to lose something and keep going anyway. That's what makes great art. Not perfection. Truth." Elena thought about all the years she'd spent tuning pianos for other people, walking into beautiful homes and concert halls, adjusting the instruments and then leaving while someone else got to make the music. She'd told herself she was fine with it, that being close to music was enough, but it hadn't been enough. She'd been slowly suffocating, pretending that a piece of her hadn't died when she locked her dreams away. "Yes," she said, "I'll do it." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Elena met so many people that she stopped trying to remember all their names. Everyone wanted to shake her hand, to tell her how moved they were by her performance, to share their own stories about dreams they'd given up or pursued. She realized that her story had touched something in people, something that went beyond just music. Victoria approached her one more time before the evening ended. She looked different now, less polished and more human. "I wanted to explain something," Victoria said quietly. "Not as an excuse, but maybe so you understand. I grew up with money, went to the best schools, had every advantage. But I never had talent. Not real talent like yours. I think that's why I was so quick to judge you. You walked in here with nothing but yourself, and you had something I've spent my whole life trying to buy. That's hard to admit." Elena looked at her for a long moment. "You know what's interesting? I spent the first part of this evening wishing I could be like you. Confident, powerful, belonging here. I guess we all want what we don't have." "I suppose we do," Victoria said with a sad smile. "For what it's worth, I hope you get everything you deserve. And I mean that sincerely." After Victoria walked away, Elena found a quiet corner and sat down for a moment. Her feet hurt from standing in her old shoes. Her face hurt from smiling. Her heart felt like it might burst from all the emotions swirling inside her. She pulled out her phone and looked at the photo she kept as her wallpaper. It was her and her mother, taken about a year before she got sick. They were sitting at the old upright piano in their apartment, both laughing at something. Elena couldn't even remember what had been funny that day, but she remembered the feeling of being exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. "I did it, Mom," she whispered to the photo. "I know it took 6 years, but I found my way back. I hope you can see this somehow." Carmen showed up anyway, unable to stay away. She found Elena in the quiet corner and pulled her into a fierce hug. "You're not allowed to ever doubt yourself again," Carmen said. "You hear me? This is who you always were. Tonight just reminded everyone else of what I already knew." They stayed for the rest of the gala, watching the charity auction raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. Elena bid on nothing, having exactly $20 to her name, but it didn't matter. She had something worth more than money now. She had her future back. When the evening finally ended and Elena walked to her car, she found a note tucked under her windshield wiper. It was from Dorothy, written in elegant handwriting on conservatory letterhead. "Elena, your classes resume on Monday. Your old professors can't wait to have you back. Also, there's an envelope waiting for you at the registrar's office with your first month's living expenses. Welcome home." Elena sat in her car for a long time holding that note, crying tears that were equal parts joy and relief and disbelief. She thought about the girl who had almost thrown away that invitation. The girl who had almost let fear and embarrassment drive her away from this ballroom. The girl who had forgotten that she was more than her circumstances. 6 months later, Elena stood backstage at Carnegie Hall. She could hear the audience settling into their seats. The murmur of voices, the rustle of programs. She was wearing a real concert gown now, deep blue like midnight that Carmen had helped her pick out. Her hair was styled professionally. She had a manager, an agent, and an album being released next month. But none of that mattered as much as the feeling in her chest. The feeling of knowing she was about to walk out onto that stage and do what she was born to do. Trevor found her backstage. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," Elena admitted. "But the good kind of terrified. That's the only kind worth having," he said with a smile. "You ready?" Elena thought about everything that had led her to this moment. The invitation that changed everything. The humiliation that almost broke her. The piano that saved her. The people who believed in her when she'd forgotten how to believe in herself. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." She walked onto the Carnegie Hall stage to thunderous applause, sat at the piano, and began to play. And as her fingers found the keys, as the music poured out of her and filled that historic hall, Elena Martinez knew that she was finally, truly home. Some people are born into their dreams. Others have to fight for them, lose them, and fight for them again. Elena's path hadn't been easy, but it had been hers. And every struggle, every setback, every moment of doubt had made this moment possible. The poor guest who had been mocked at the gala wasn't poor at all. She had been rich in the only currency that really mattered. She had talent, courage, and a story worth telling. And now the whole world was listening.